Bullies tried to punch the new kid in the face, but they didn't expect him to be trained and ready to dodge and beat the crap out of them and their friends. Marcus Rivera stepped through the glass doors of Westfield High School on a cold Monday morning in October, clutching the straps of his worn backpack tighter than necessary. At 17, he stood barely 5'6" with a lean frame that made him look younger than his years. His dark hair fell across his forehead in unruly waves, and his clothes, second-hand jeans and a faded grey hoodie, screamed easy target to anyone looking for trouble. Moving from Detroit to this affluent suburb had been his mother's idea of a fresh start after his father's death, but Marcus knew better. Trouble had a way of finding him no matter where he went. The hallways of Westfield High buzzed with the energy of students returning from weekend adventures. Designer backpacks, expensive sneakers, and the latest smartphones created a stark contrast to Marcus's humble appearance. He kept his head down, navigating through clusters of teenagers who barely acknowledged his existence. This was exactly how he preferred it: anonymous, invisible, safe. Mrs. Patterson, his first-period English teacher, introduced him to the class with forced enthusiasm. "Everyone, we have a new student joining us today. Marcus Rivera. Would you like to tell us a little about yourself?" "I'm from Detroit," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely carrying to the back of the room. "That's about it." A few snickers rippled through the classroom. He caught sight of 3 boys in the back row exchanging glances and smirks. The largest of the 3, a broad-shouldered kid with bleached hair and cold blue eyes, leaned back in his chair with an expression that Marcus recognized all too well. Predator sizing up prey. During lunch, Marcus found an empty table in the corner of the cafeteria, hoping to eat his sandwich in peace while observing the social hierarchy around him. The popular kids commanded the center tables, their laughter echoing off the walls. Athletes clustered near the windows, still wearing their Letterman jackets like armor. And scattered throughout were the various cliques and groups that made high school feel like a carefully orchestrated performance. Well, what do we have here?" The voice came from behind him, dripping with mock curiosity. Marcus turned to see the 3 boys from his English class approaching his table. The leader, the one with bleached hair, wore a varsity football jacket with Thompson embroidered across the back. His 2 companions flanked him like loyal soldiers. One was tall and lanky with acne-scarred cheeks, while the other was stocky with arms that suggested he spent considerable time in the weight room. "You're the new kid, right?" "Marcus?" Thompson asked, sliding into the seat across from him without invitation. "I'm Jake Thompson. This is Tyler," he gestured to the tall one, "and Brett," indicating the stocky companion. "We run things around here, just so you know." Marcus continued eating his sandwich, hoping they'd lose interest and move on. Experience had taught him that engaging with bullies only escalated situations. Better to weather the storm and hope it passed quickly. "Not much of a talker, are you?" Jake continued, reaching across the table to grab Marcus's apple. He took a large bite, juice running down his chin. "That's probably smart. Quiet kids tend to stay out of trouble." Tyler snorted with laughter. "Look at him, Jake. I bet he's never even been in a fight. Probably cries when he gets a paper cut." "Leave me alone," Marcus said quietly, his eyes never leaving his lunch tray. "Or what?" Brett chimed in, his voice artificially high-pitched in mockery. "You gonna run home to mommy? Oh, wait. I heard you don't have a daddy anymore. That's rough, man. No wonder you're such a wimp." The comment hit like a physical blow, but Marcus forced himself to remain calm. His hands clenched into fists under the table, muscle memory from countless hours of training threatening to override his carefully maintained control. But he couldn't reveal that part of himself. Not here. Not ever. "I think our new friend needs to understand how things work at Westfield," Jake said, standing up and motioning for his friends to follow. "See you around, Marcus. Real soon." As they walked away, Marcus allowed himself a moment to breathe deeply. releasing the tension that had coiled in his shoulders. Around him, other students returned to their conversations, having witnessed the encounter with the detached interest of spectators at a zoo. No one intervened. No one ever did. The pattern established itself quickly over the following weeks. Jake and his crew, who Marcus learned were fixtures of the football team and untouchable in the school's social ecosystem, made his life miserable with calculated precision. They would accidentally bump into him in the hallways, sending his books scattering across the floor. They'd steal his lunch money, claiming it was a new student tax. In gym class, they'd target him during dodgeball with throws that bordered on assault. The worst incidents happened in the spaces between classes, when teachers weren't watching and administrators were nowhere to be found. Jake seemed to have an instinct for finding Marcus alone, whether in empty hallways or secluded stairwells. Each encounter followed a similar pattern, verbal taunts escalating to physical intimidation, all while Marcus maintained his passive stance. "Why don't you fight back?" Jake asked one afternoon after cornering Marcus near the chemistry lab. "Are you really that pathetic, or are you just scared?" Marcus said nothing, his dark eyes fixed on a point somewhere past Jake's shoulder. Inside, however, a different conversation was taking place. Every muscle in his body catalogued Jake's stance, his balance, the way he favored his right side. Marcus could see at least 4 different ways to end this confrontation in under 10 seconds, but he forced himself to remain still. He had made a promise to his mother after they moved from Detroit. No more fighting, no more violence. She had seen what that world could do, had buried her husband because of it, and Marcus refused to break her heart by returning to those ways, even if it meant enduring humiliation daily. "I think he's broken," Tyler observed, pushing Marcus's shoulder hard enough to send him stumbling backward, like a toy that stopped working. "Maybe we need to wind him up," Brett suggested, cracking his knuckles theatrically. But Jake held up a hand, stopping his friends from escalating further. There was something calculating in his expression, as if he was studying Marcus for signs of weakness or hidden strength. "Nah, not here. Too many cameras. But soon, new boy. Real soon." The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon in late November. Marcus had been at Westfield for nearly 2 months, and the daily torment had become as predictable as his morning alarm. He had developed strategies for avoiding the worst of it, alternate routes through the building, timing his movements to avoid Jake's crew, eating lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria. But on this particular day, his carefully constructed defenses failed him. Marcus was leaving his last class when he realized he'd forgotten his biology textbook. The hallways had mostly emptied, with most students eager to start their weekends. He quickly retrieved the book from his locker and headed toward the main exit, only to find his path blocked by Jake, Tyler, and Brett near the gymnasium doors. "Going somewhere, new boy?" Jake asked, his voice carrying an edge that Marcus hadn't heard before. "Just heading home," Marcus replied, shifting the textbook to his other arm and looking for an alternate route. "Actually, I think you're coming with us," Jake said, stepping closer. "We've been talking, and we realized we never properly welcomed you to Westfield. That's not very hospitable of us." Before Marcus could respond, Tyler grabbed his arm, while Brett moved to block any potential escape route. They guided him through the gym doors and down a corridor that led to the weight room. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the concrete walls, and Marcus felt his heart rate increase despite his efforts to stay calm. The weight room was empty, its windows facing the back parking lot where no one would see what happened inside. Jake flicked on the lights, and the fluorescent bulbs cast harsh shadows across the equipment. "Here's the thing, Marcus," Jake said, removing his letter jacket and hanging it carefully on a hook. "I've been watching you these past couple months, and something doesn't add up. You take everything we dish out without fighting back, but there's something in your eyes, something that says you could fight back if you wanted to." Marcus set his textbook on a nearby bench, his movements deliberate and controlled. "I don't want any trouble." "Too bad," Tyler interjected, "because trouble found you." "See, I think you're hiding something," Jake continued, rolling up his sleeves. "Maybe you're tougher than you look. Maybe you're just playing victim to get sympathy. Either way, I'm tired of wondering." Brett cracked his knuckles again, the sound unnaturally loud in the enclosed space. "Can we just get this over with? I've got plans tonight." "You know what I think?" Jake asked, stepping into Marcus's personal space. "I think you're a fake. I think you're putting on this whole quiet act because you're scared of what people might think if they knew the real you. But I'm going to find out who you really are." Without warning, Jake's right hand shot forward in a straight punch aimed directly at Marcus's face. It was a telegraphed attack, thrown with the confidence of someone who had never encountered real resistance. Jake expected to connect with Marcus's nose, to see blood and tears, and finally break through the new kid's mysterious composure. Instead, Marcus tilted his head 6 inches to the left. Jake's fist whistled past Marcus's ear, the momentum carrying him forward and off balance. For a moment, confusion flickered across the bully's face as his brain tried to process what had just happened. In that same instant, Marcus's body moved with fluid precision that spoke of countless hours of training. His left hand shot up to grab Jake's extended wrist while his right palm struck upward into Jake's elbow joint. The combination created a leverage point that sent Jake spinning sideways before crashing into a rack of dumbbells. The metal weights clanged together like discordant bells as Jake hit the floor hard. Tyler reacted first, charging forward with his longer reach and throwing a wild haymaker. Marcus ducked under the punch and swept Tyler's lead leg, sending the tall boy tumbling to the ground. Before Tyler could recover, Marcus grabbed him by the shirt and helped him to his feet, only to immediately throw him back down with a perfectly executed hip toss that sent Tyler sliding across the rubberized floor. Brett, despite his stocky build and weight room experience, hesitated for a crucial second as he watched his two friends get dismantled with surgical precision. That hesitation cost him dearly. Marcus closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps, feinted left to draw Brett's guard in that direction, then drove his right fist into Brett's solar plexus with enough force to double him over, gasping for air. The entire confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds. Jake struggled to his feet, his leather jacket now wrinkled and his bleached hair disheveled. Blood trickled from a small cut on his forehead where he'd struck the dumbbell rack. "What the hell? How did you wanted to know who I really am?" Marcus asked, his voice calm, but carrying a new authority that filled the room. "I'm someone who's been fighting since I was 8 years old. I'm someone who spent every afternoon for 9 years learning how to hurt people with my bare hands. I'm someone who chose not to use those skills because I promised my mother I wouldn't become the kind of person who solves problems with violence." Tyler rolled over onto his hands and knees, still trying to figure out how he'd ended up on the floor so quickly. Brett remained doubled over, taking shallow breaths and looking like he might be sick. "But here's what you need to understand," Marcus continued, his dark eyes moving from one defeated bully to the next. "Just because I don't want to fight doesn't mean I can't fight. Just because I prefer peace doesn't mean I'll let you walk all over me forever. You pushed and pushed until you broke something inside me, and now you get to see what I've been holding back." Jake wiped blood from his forehead with the back of his hand, his expression cycling through anger, confusion, and something that might have been fear. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Marcus replied firmly, "because if you come at me again, I won't hold back next time." "What just happened?" "That was me being gentle. That was me using just enough force to make a point without seriously hurting any of you. But if you push me again, if you make me choose between your well-being and mine, I'll choose mine every single time." He picked up his biology textbook and walked toward the door, pausing only when Jake called out behind him. "Wait! How do we know you won't tell anyone about this?" Marcus turned back, studying the three boys who had made his life miserable for months. They looked smaller now, somehow deflated and ordinary. Because this was never about embarrassing you or getting revenge. This was about making it stop. If it stops, then we're done. If it doesn't, he shrugged. Well, you've seen what happens when you underestimate people. Word of the weight room incident spread through Westfield High with the speed that only high school gossip could achieve. By Monday morning, everyone seemed to know that something had happened between Marcus Rivera and Jake Thompson's crew, though the details varied wildly depending on who was telling the story. Some versions had Marcus as a secret martial arts champion who had destroyed 3 football players without breaking a sweat. Others claimed he was connected to dangerous people back in Detroit and had made threats that scared Jake into backing down. A few creative souls even suggested he was in witness protection and had government training. Marcus ignored the whispers and stares, maintaining his preference for quiet anonymity. But something fundamental had shifted in the school's social dynamics. Students who had previously looked through him now offered cautious nods of acknowledgement in the hallways. Teachers seemed more inclined to include him in class discussions. Even the cafeteria lady gave him extra portions without being asked. Jake, Tyler, and Brett kept their distance, though Marcus occasionally caught them watching him from across rooms with expressions he couldn't quite read. There were no more accidental encounters, no more lunch money taxation, no more targeted harassment. The 3 boys seemed to have developed a sudden interest in avoiding Marcus entirely. The transformation wasn't lost on other students who had been suffering under similar treatment. A sophomore named Danny Chen, who had been Jake's previous favorite target, approached Marcus one afternoon with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "I don't know what you did," Danny said quietly, "but thank you. Jake hasn't bothered me once since last week." Marcus nodded, but didn't elaborate. He had no interest in becoming the school's designated hero or protector. He simply wanted to finish his senior year in peace and move on to whatever came next. The real test came 3 weeks later during lunch period. Marcus was sitting at his usual corner table, finally able to eat without constantly watching his back, when he noticed a commotion near the center of the cafeteria. A group of upperclassmen had surrounded a freshman girl, taunting her about her homemade clothes and discount sneakers while she tried unsuccessfully to gather her scattered books. For a moment, Marcus felt the familiar urge to intervene, to use his skills to help someone who couldn't help themselves. But then he caught sight of Jake Thompson at a nearby table, watching the scene unfold with detached interest. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Marcus saw something like understanding pass between them. Jake stood up, walked over to the group of bullies, and said something that Marcus couldn't hear. Whatever it was, it caused the upperclassmen to disperse immediately, leaving the freshman girl to collect her belongings in peace. Jake didn't make a big show of it or seek recognition for his intervention. He simply returned to his table and continued eating his lunch. It wasn't redemption exactly. Jake Thompson was still the same person who had made Marcus's life miserable for months. But it was acknowledgement, recognition that power came with responsibility and that strength should protect rather than prey upon weakness. As Marcus finished his senior year at Westfield High, he reflected on the lessons he had learned about violence, choice, and the courage required to break cycles of harm. He had discovered that true strength wasn't measured by how much damage you could inflict, but by how much restraint you could show when provoked. He had learned that sometimes you had to stand up for yourself to earn respect, but that standing up didn't require becoming what you despised. Most importantly, he had proven to himself that he could honor his promise to his mother while still protecting his own dignity. The skills his father had taught him, before the violence of that world claimed his life, didn't have to define Marcus's future. They could simply be tools in his arsenal, used only when absolutely necessary and always with the goal of de-escalation rather than domination. On graduation day, as Marcus walked across the stage to receive his diploma, he caught sight of Jake Thompson in the audience. The former bully offered a small nod of acknowledgement. Not friendship exactly, but mutual respect between two people who had learned something valuable about themselves and each other. Marcus nodded back, then looked toward the future with the confidence that came from knowing who he really was and what he was capable of when pushed too far. He had found his balance between peace and strength, between victim and aggressor, and that balance would serve him well in whatever challenges lay ahead.